The emergency room at Cedarbrook General never sleeps, and tonight neither will the man who just walked in wearing a dark suit and eyes that have already decided someone's fate. But first, the moment that changed everything. He grabbed her hair in front of everyone. Not a tap, not an accident. He wrapped his fingers around her ponytail and yanked, hard enough to snap her head back, hard enough to make the whole emergency room go silent. Talia Moreno didn't scream. She didn't cry. She grabbed the counter with both hands, steadied herself, and turned around slowly. The man standing in front of her was Dr. Fabian Cross, chief surgeon, 15 years at Cedarbrook General, the kind of man who had never once been told no. "Pay attention when I'm talking to you," he said, calm, quiet, like he hadn't just put his hands on her in front of 30 people. The ER froze. "If you're listening right now, kindly tell me where you're watching from and how the weather is right now. Then don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more stories like this. Now let's continue." An emergency nurse holding a clipboard stopped breathing. A mother pulling her sick child closer to her chest stared with wide eyes. 2 orderlies exchanged a look but didn't move. Nobody moved. Talia's hands were shaking, not from fear, from something she had to hold down before it came out of her mouth and ended her career on the spot. She was good at her job, the best on that floor. She had worked 12-hour shifts without complaints, handled emergencies that made grown men faint, and never once let her personal feelings interrupt patient care. She had earned every inch of her position. And he just grabbed her like she was nothing, like she was furniture he could push around. "Why?" she said, one word, barely above a whisper. Dr. Cross smirked, actually smirked. Then he straightened his coat, turned around, and walked away like nothing happened. The room stayed silent for 3 full seconds. Then the whispers started. Talia didn't look at anyone. She picked up her chart, clicked her pen, and walked toward Bay 4. Shoulders straight, chin up, every step controlled. But her eyes were burning. What nobody in that room noticed, what nobody was supposed to notice, was the man standing near the east corridor, still, quiet, watching. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a patient. He wore a dark suit, and he hadn't moved once since the moment Dr. Cross grabbed her hair. He watched Talia walk away. He watched Dr. Cross disappear around the corner. And then, very slowly, he pulled out his phone and typed something. 1 sentence. Then he put the phone back in his pocket and walked out of the ER without saying anything to anyone. Nobody knew his name yet. Nobody knew why he was there, but he had seen everything, and that was the moment this whole thing started. Now here's what I need you to think about. That man in the dark suit, why do you think he was in that ER? Was he watching Dr. Cross, or was he watching her? The whispers started before Talia even reached Bay 4. She could hear them. She was supposed to. That was the point. Did he really just... Nobody said anything, though. What is she going to do? She pulled the curtain shut behind her, pressed her back against the wall, and closed her eyes for exactly 4 seconds. That was all she allowed herself. 4 seconds. Then she opened them, looked down at the chart in her hands, and got back to work. Because that's what Talia did. She worked. The patient in Bay 4 was a 7-year-old boy with a broken arm. He was trying not to cry and failing. His mother sat beside him, squeezing his good hand so tight her knuckles had gone white. Talia smiled at him, a real smile, not the polished professional kind, the kind that said, "I see you. You're going to be okay." "What's your name?" she asked. "Marcus," he whispered. "Well, Marcus, I've seen a lot of broken arms in my life. You want to know something? She leaned in close. Yours is actually pretty impressive. He laughed. Just a little, but he laughed. His mother mouthed, "Thank you," over his head. Talia nodded and kept moving. That was the part nobody outside that curtain ever saw. The part that happened after the humiliation. The part where she swallowed her pain whole and used what was left to take care of someone else. But the moment she stepped back into the main floor, the air changed. Dr. Cross was standing at the nurses' station, talking to HR coordinator Linda Pruitt. Both of them looked up when Talia walked out. Linda smiled first, that careful corporate smile that meant absolutely nothing good. "Talia," she said, "do you have a few minutes?" It wasn't a question. They walked her into a side office, closed the door. Linda sat across from her and folded her hands on the table like this was a casual conversation between friends. "We just want to make sure you're okay," Linda said. "In high-stress environments, things can be misread." "He grabbed my hair," Talia said. Linda didn't blink. "Of course, and we take all concerns seriously. But Dr. Cross has explained that it was a reaction. He was trying to get your attention during a critical moment, and—" "He grabbed my hair," Talia said again, slower this time. The room went quiet. Linda clicked her pen twice. "We just want to make sure this doesn't become something that affects your career trajectory here." There it was. Not a warning, a threat, wrapped in a smile and HR language. Talia stood up, smoothed her scrubs, and walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the knob. "Write that down," she said quietly. "Everything you just said to me, write it down." Then she walked out. She didn't see Linda pick up the phone the second the door closed. But someone else did. HR just threatened her career instead of protecting her. Have you ever been in a situation where the system failed you when you needed it most? Linda's hand was still on the phone when the office door opened. Not Talia. Someone else. He stepped inside without knocking, without being invited, without any of the hesitation that normal people have when they walk into a room that isn't theirs. He simply walked in, looked at Linda, and sat down in the chair Talia had just left. Linda froze. "I'm sorry, this office is—" "Han Sung-Jun." He said his name like it was the only explanation needed. Then he placed a single business card flat on the table and slid it across to her with one finger. Linda looked down at it. Her face changed. Whatever color was in her cheeks drained out completely. Her hand came off the phone slowly. She set it down like it had burned her. "I didn't know you were—" "I know you didn't," he said. He wasn't loud. He wasn't aggressive. He didn't raise his voice even slightly. And somehow that made it so much worse, because the quieter he was, the more dangerous the air around him felt. He looked around the small office, at the filing cabinet, at the desk, at the notepad where Linda had been about to write absolutely nothing down. "The nurse on duty during the incident," he said. "Her name is Carmen Reyes. She was standing 4 feet away." He paused. "She saw everything." Linda said nothing. "The patient in Bay 2, a retired judge, came in with chest pains. His bed had a direct sight line to the nurse's station." Another pause. "He saw everything, too." The pen in Linda's desk dropped. Han Sung-Jun stood up, straightened his jacket, looked at her one last time. "You were about to make a phone call," he said. "I'd think carefully about that." Then he walked out. He didn't go far. He stopped in the hallway just outside the ER floor and stood near the water fountain with his phone in his hand. From where he stood, he could see the nurse's station, the side corridor, and the entrance to the parking structure. He had been in that hospital for 6 hours before anyone grabbed Talia's hair. 6 hours.
He had watched Dr. Cross cut off 2 nurses mid-sentence, take credit for a resident's diagnosis out loud in front of a patient, and make a joke in the break room that made 3 people go completely silent. None of that was why Han Sung-joon was there. He was there because of something that happened 4 years ago, something that connected him to Cedarbrook General in a way that nobody in that building knew about yet, not even Talia. He pulled up a contact on his phone, typed 4 words. "She's exactly who I thought." He hit send, put the phone in his pocket, and then he looked up, directly at the security camera above the water fountain. He already knew it wasn't recording. He had made sure of that this morning. This man turned off the security camera before any of this happened. That means he planned this, but planned it for what reason? To protect her or to use her?
The note was taped to her locker. No envelope, no signature, just a folded piece of paper with 4 words written in blue ink. "Let it go, Talia." She stood there in the empty locker room, staring at it. Her shift had ended 20 minutes ago. Most of the staff had already cleared out. The room was quiet except for the hum of the ventilation system above her head. She unfolded it slowly. That was all it said, 4 words. But the handwriting, she had seen that handwriting on patient charts for 3 years. She folded it back up, put it in her scrubs pocket, and walked out. Dr. Cross was leaning against the wall directly outside the locker room door, waiting. "Long day," he said, casual, like they were colleagues catching up after a normal shift. Talia didn't stop walking. He fell into step beside her. "I've been at this hospital for 15 years, he said. "You know what I've learned? People who make noise," he paused just long enough, "don't last." She stopped walking, turned and looked at him directly, something she had been trained her whole career not to do with men like him. "Is that a threat?" Talia asked. He smiled, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. "It's experience," he said. "I'm trying to help you. You grabbed my hair. I tapped your shoulder." He tilted his head slightly. "Ask anyone who was there." The words hit her like cold water, because she understood immediately what he had just done. He hadn't denied it. He had replaced it, rebuilt it, turned a public act of humiliation into a tap on the shoulder, and if he had already spoken to enough people on that floor, the version in their heads was already shifting. That was how men like Dr. Cross survived, not by hiding what they did, by rewriting it. "My attorney will call it whatever it was," Talia said. Something moved behind his eyes, just for a second, then the smile came back. "You don't have an attorney," he said. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds, then she turned and walked toward the exit. She did not have an attorney, not yet, but the moment she pushed through the hospital doors into the cold night air, her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. No name, no introduction, just a name and address. "Raymond Holt, Family and Employment Law, 8 a.m. tomorrow. He's expecting you." She stopped walking, looked up and down the parking lot, empty except for 2 cars and a security guard at the far end checking his phone. Nobody watching, nobody nearby. She looked back down at the text. Whoever sent it already knew she didn't have a lawyer, which meant they had heard her conversation with Dr. Cross, which meant they had been right there. Invisible. Someone is close enough to hear her private conversations and is already 10 steps ahead. Would you trust help from someone you can't see or identify? The attorney's office smelled like old coffee and printer ink. Raymond Holt was already at his desk when Talia walked in at 7:58 a.m. He was older than she expected, calm in the way that people get after decades of sitting across from people in pain. He gestured to the chair without standing up. "Someone already sent me everything," he said. Talia sat down slowly. "What do you mean, everything?" He turned his monitor to face her. Emails, 14 of them, sent from an encrypted address to his office at 11:47 p.m. the previous night, time-stamped, organized, each one labeled clearly. The first email had a patient report from Bay 2, the retired judge, a written statement, signed, dated, describing exactly what he saw Dr. Cross do. The second email had a personnel file, Dr. Cross, going back 9 years, 3 prior complaints, all buried, all marked resolved with no documentation of how. The third email had something that made Talia's hands go cold. A photo, taken inside the hospital, time-stamped from the night of the incident. It showed Dr. Cross standing at Linda's desk 20 minutes before he ever walked onto the ER floor. He had gone to HR first. Before he grabbed her hair, he had already been to HR. He planned it, Talia said, quietly, more to herself than to Holt. The attorney nodded. That's what it looks like. She sat back in the chair. Her mind was running fast. Dr. Cross hadn't lost his temper. He hadn't acted on impulse. He had walked into HR, said whatever he needed to say, set up his cover story, and then walked out onto that floor and grabbed her hair, knowing that the first call she made would go nowhere. He had built the wall before she even knew she needed a door. "Who sent you this?" she asked. Holt shook his head. Encrypted, no trace. Whoever it was knew exactly what they were doing. Talia looked at the screen for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and opened the text from the night before, the unknown number, the one that sent her here. She typed one word, "Why?" 3 dots appeared immediately, like whoever it was had been waiting. Then the reply came. Check the timestamp on the 3rd complaint, then check who signed off on burying it. She looked up at Holt. "Can you pull the 3rd complaint file?" He was already clicking. The file opened. She leaned forward, scanned down to the bottom of the page where the sign-off signature sat in black ink. She read the name once. Then again. Her stomach dropped. The person who buried that complaint, who made sure it disappeared 9 years ago, wasn't HR, wasn't administration. It was the chief of the hospital board. And underneath his signature was a second name, a co-signer, someone who, according to every record she had ever seen, had never worked at Cedarbrook General a day in their life. Han Sung-Jun. He buried a complaint 9 years ago at a hospital he supposedly never worked at. Who is Han Sung-Jun really, and which side is he actually on? Talia took a photo of the signature with her phone and walked out of Holt's office without saying goodbye. She sat in her car for 11 minutes without starting the engine. Han Sung-Jun had co-signed a document that buried a complaint against Dr. Cross. 9 years ago, at a hospital he had no official record of ever being connected to, and now he was here, in that same hospital, watching, helping, sending anonymous texts and forwarding evidence to her attorney in the middle of the night. None of it added up, and the parts that did scared her. She started the car. When she walked onto the ER floor 30 minutes later, something was already different. She felt it before she could name it. The energy had shifted. 3 nurses who normally made direct eye contact with her looked away. A resident who always greeted her in the hallway suddenly found something interesting on his clipboard. Then she saw her schedule. Someone had moved her off the main floor into triage intake, the worst assignment in the building, isolated, low visibility, no interaction with senior staff. It was the kind of move that didn't come with an explanation because it didn't need one. Everyone on that floor knew what it meant. Stay quiet or get smaller. She picked up her clipboard and walked to triage without a word. By noon, 2 things had appeared on her desk. The first was a printed copy of the hospital's internal complaint procedure. Someone had highlighted Section 4B in yellow, the part that outlined an employee's right to an independent investigation outside of HR jurisdiction.
In the margin, in small, neat handwriting, were 3 words: "Use this first." The second thing was a folded piece of paper. She opened it slowly. Inside was a list of 6 names, all current Cedarbrook staff. Next to each name was a date and a 1-line description. Every single one of them had a prior interaction with Dr. Cross that never been reported. A missed promotion, a sudden transfer, a formal warning that appeared out of nowhere after a disagreement with him. 6 people, 6 stories, all buried. She looked up from the paper and scanned the room. Nurses moving, patients waiting, a janitor pushing a cart near the far wall. Nobody looking at her. She turned the paper over. On the back, 1 line: "They'll talk, but only if you ask the right way." She folded it carefully and put it in her coat pocket. Then she pulled out her phone and opened the unknown number. She typed slowly: "You buried that complaint 9 years ago. I saw your name." She waited. 60 seconds passed, then 90. Then the reply came: "I know what you saw. It's not what you think. But if you go looking for that answer before you're ready, Cross will know. And everything you've built so far disappears overnight." She stared at the screen. He wasn't denying his name on that document. He's telling her the timing isn't right. But what kind of person controls the timing of their own exposure unless they already control everything else?
The first name on the list was Carmen Reyes. Talia found her in the break room at 2:15 p.m., sitting alone with a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Carmen was 26 years old, 3 years at Cedarbrook, the kind of nurse who remembered every patient's name and stayed late without being asked. Talia sat down across from her and put the folded paper flat on the table between them. Carmen looked at it, then at Talia, then back at the paper. "I can't," she said, before Talia even opened her mouth. "I haven't asked you anything yet," Talia said. Carmen wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. 8 months ago, I filed a concern about a medication dosage Dr. Cross ordered. I was right. The dosage was wrong. The patient could have died." She stopped. 2 weeks later, I got a written warning for insubordination. It's in my file right now. The room was quiet. "They flipped it," Talia said. Carmen nodded, barely. "My warning is sitting in a file, and his mistake doesn't exist anywhere." Talia pulled out her phone and opened a blank notes page, slid it across to Carmen. "Write the date, the patient ID number, the dosage, exactly what you remember." Carmen stared at the phone like it was something that could hurt her. "I have a daughter," she said, quietly. "She's 4. I'm doing this alone." "I know," Talia said, and she meant it. She wasn't pushing. She wasn't performing urgency. She just sat there and let Carmen feel the full weight of both choices. 40 seconds passed. Carmen picked up the phone and started typing. By 4 p.m., Talia had spoken to 3 more people from the list. A resident named David Park, who had been passed over for a promotion after questioning Cross in front of a patient. A senior orderly named George Timms, who had witnessed the surgery complication that was never documented. A billing clerk named Rosa Acevedo, who'd found charges on patient accounts that didn't match any procedure on record. 4 people, 4 completely separate stories, all pointing in the same direction. This wasn't a bad day or a short temper. This was a system, built carefully over years, designed to protect one man at the expense of everyone around him, including the patients. Talia sat in her car after her shift and typed everything into a document: names, dates, details. She saved it to 3 different places, emailed it to Holt, then sat back and pressed her palms against her eyes. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "There's a 6th person you haven't reached yet. She's the most important one. Her name is Dr. Sylvia Grant. She doesn't work at Cedarbrook anymore.
Cross made sure of that 3 years ago. Find her before he realizes you know she exists. Talia lowered the phone slowly. Sylvia Grant. She typed the name into her search bar. The first result that came up was an obituary.
The nurse cried the moment Talia closed the door. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears rolling down her face while she sat in the small break room with both hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone cold an hour ago. Her name was Carmen Reyes. She had been at Cedarbrook General for 11 years. She had 3 kids, a mortgage, and a performance review coming up in 2 weeks. "I saw everything," Carmen whispered. "I was 4 feet away." Talia sat across from her and didn't say a word. She had learned a long time ago that silence was sometimes the only thing that made people feel safe enough to keep talking. "He's done it before," Carmen said. "Not the hair, but other things, little things, things that don't sound bad when you say them out loud but feel wrong every single time." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I have kids, Talia. I know. If he finds out I talk to you, he won't find out from me." Carmen looked up, searched her face. Then she reached into her scrub pocket and pulled out her phone, scrolled to a folder, held it out. Inside were screenshots, 17 of them, texts between Carmen and a senior nurse named Dolores Webb going back 8 months. Every message documented something small, a changed schedule, a patient complaint that disappeared, a medication discrepancy that got blamed on the wrong person. 17 screenshots, 8 months, all time-stamped. Talia's hands were steady when she took the phone, but her chest was tight. This wasn't one bad day. This was a system, running quietly in the background, for years. She handed the phone back. "Can you send those to this email?" She wrote Raymond Holt's address on a napkin and slid it across the table. Carmen stared at the napkin for a long moment. Then she folded it and put it in her pocket. "There's something else," Carmen said quietly. 3 days before the incident, Dr. Cross had a meeting, private, in the East Conference Room. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I was restocking the supply cart outside the door. She paused. "There was someone with him. I didn't see his face, but I heard him say one thing before I moved away." Talia leaned forward slightly. "What did he say?" Carmen set down her coffee cup. "He said she's not going to be a problem for much longer." The room went completely still. "How long ago?" Talia asked. 3 days before he grabbed your hair." Talia sat back slowly. The timeline rearranged itself in her head. The HR visit before the incident, the buried complaints, the schedule change, the note on her locker. None of this was impulse. Every single piece had been set up in advance. But if Dr. Cross had a meeting 3 days before he touched her, then someone in that room already knew what was coming, and that someone had let it happen anyway. Someone knew what Dr. Cross was planning 3 days before he touched her and stayed silent. Who was in that room with him, and is it the same person who's been helping her all along? The East Conference Room was locked. Talia stood in front of it with her badge in her hand. She had tried swiping 3 times. Each time the little light blinked red. Access denied. She had clearance for almost every room on this floor, not this one. She looked up at the camera above the door. Then she walked away. She spent her lunch break pulling access logs from the internal system, a basic function any senior nurse could perform for patient room tracking. She wasn't looking for patient rooms. She cross-referenced the East Conference Room against the staff access records for the 3 days before the incident. The room had been accessed 4 times. 3 of those times were Dr. Cross, normal enough. He used that room for private consultations. The 4th access, the one that happened at 9:14 p.m. 2 nights before he grabbed her hair, had no name attached to it, just a code, a contractor access code, the kind issued to outside vendors, inspectors, or board representatives. She wrote the code down on her palm and kept moving. By the time her shift ended, she had circled back to Raymond Holt twice by phone. He was already pulling the contractor code through his own channels. He told her to sit tight. She didn't sit tight. She went back to the list of 6 names, the one left on her desk. She had already spoken to Carmen. Now she drove 20 minutes across town to a diner on Mercer Street where a former Cedarbrook employee named David Pratt had agreed to meet her. He was already there when she arrived, sitting in the back booth, baseball cap pulled low, both hands flat on the table like he was trying to hold himself down. He had been a senior resident 3 years ago, one of the best in his program according to 2 different attendings. Then a complaint appeared in his file out of nowhere. Poor judgment, unprofessional conduct. He was gone within a month. He told her everything in 12 minutes flat, no pauses, no hesitation, like he had been waiting for someone to finally ask. When he was done, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a USB drive, set it on the table between them. I kept copies of everything, every email, every altered note. I kept them because I knew one day someone would come. He looked at her directly. I just didn't think it would take 3 years. She reached for the drive. His hand came down on top of hers, not aggressive, urgent. There's something on there you need to be ready for. A name keeps coming up in the emails, someone who was communicating with Cross privately, someone who knew everything he was doing and never reported it. He paused. But then, about 8 months ago, the emails from that person changed completely, like a switch flipped. They stopped covering for him and started documenting him instead. Talia looked at him. Who? David Pratt turned the USB drive over once in his fingers. Whoever it is, they've been building a case against Cross from the inside for 8 months, way before you were ever involved. He set the drive down. And their access code is the same contractor code that opened the East Conference Room that night. The drive sat between them on the table. Talia picked it up. Her hand was shaking for the first time since this whole thing started.
The USB drive had 43 files on it. Talia sat in her car outside the diner and opened every single one on her laptop. Rain hit the windshield in slow, uneven patterns. She didn't notice. She was too deep inside what she was reading. The first 30 files were exactly what David Pratt described. Emails between Dr. Cross and someone identified only by the contractor code. Covering up complaints, redirecting investigations, moving staff who asked too many questions into dead-end positions until they quit. Clean, efficient, calculated. But File 31 was different. It was dated 8 months ago, a Tuesday, 6:43 a.m., and the tone shifted so completely it felt like a different person had taken over the keyboard. The email was addressed to Dr. Cross. 3 sentences. What you did to that resident was not what we agreed to. I have copies of everything. Consider this the last time I clean up after you. No greeting, no signature. Cross had replied within 4 minutes, 1 line. You don't want to do this. The contractor hadn't responded, not to that email. But the next file showed something else entirely, a new encrypted folder being built. Systematic, organized, every piece of misconduct that had previously been buried was now being reconstructed, dated, labeled, preserved. Whoever this was, they hadn't just switched sides, they had started building a case the same way a prosecutor would, quietly, carefully, with the kind of patience that only comes from knowing exactly how the other person thinks. Because they had been thinking the same way themselves, until something made them stop. Talia closed the laptop, sat in the dark for a moment. Then she called Raymond Holt. He picked up on the first ring. She talked for 4 minutes straight without stopping. When she finished, there was a brief silence on his end. Bring me the drive tonight, he said. Not tomorrow, tonight. She drove to his office. He was waiting at the door with the lights already on. He took the drive, plugged it in, and spent 20 minutes going through files without saying a single word. His face stayed completely neutral the entire time. That was how she knew it was serious. Lawyers only went that quiet when something was bigger than they expected. Finally, he looked up. "This is enough," he said. "Not almost enough, enough. We can file for an independent investigation first thing tomorrow morning, and Cross cannot touch it once it's filed. It goes above the board entirely." Talia exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. "There's one problem," Holt said. He turned the monitor toward her. He had pulled up the contractor code through his own legal channels, cross-referenced it against state licensing records, vendor registrations, board affiliations. The code traced back to one name. She read it, looked up at Holt, looked back at the screen. Han Sung-Jun hadn't just switched sides 8 months ago. 8 months ago was the exact same week Talia transferred to Cedarbrook General. He switched sides the same week she arrived. That is not a coincidence. Han Sung-Jun knew who Talia was before she ever walked into that hospital. The real question is, how?
Dr. Cross was waiting at her locker again. Not leaning this time, standing straight, arms crossed, and the look on his face was different from before. The smirk was gone. What replaced it was something quieter and much more dangerous. He knew. She didn't know how, but the moment she turned the corner and saw him, she understood immediately that something had leaked. Someone had talked. Between last night and this morning, a door had opened somewhere it shouldn't have. "You filed for an independent investigation," he said, not a question. Talia kept walking toward her locker, didn't slow down, didn't speed up. "Good morning, Dr. Cross." "Who helped you?" he asked, "because that filing has details in it that you could not have accessed on your own. Patient statements, personnel records, internal emails." He took one step closer. "Someone handed you a case that took months to build." She opened her locker, pulled out her badge, clipped it to her scrubs. "The process is the process. If you have concerns, you can contact the Independent Review Board directly." His jaw tightened. "I have been at this hospital for 15 years. "I know," she said. "I've read your file." That landed. She saw it in the way his shoulders shifted, a tiny movement, almost nothing, but she had been watching people's bodies tell the truth for her entire career. She closed her locker and turned to walk away. "Dolores Webb was let go this morning," he said. 30-minute notice, personal conduct violation. His voice was flat, controlled. "Carmen Reyes is on administrative leave pending a performance review." Talia turned around slowly. "2 of the 6 people on your list. I wonder how long the other 4 last." The hallway felt very small suddenly. She could feel her pulse in her throat. Carmen had 3 kids, a mortgage, a performance review already coming, and now this. "You don't have any evidence of a list," Talia said. "I don't need evidence," he said. "I just need patience." He walked past her, close enough that she could hear him breathe. She stood in the empty hallway and pressed both palms flat against the cold metal of the lockers behind her. She needed 10 seconds, just 10 seconds to think. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered without speaking. "Don't react," Han Sung-Jun's voice said, low, calm, the first time she had ever heard it directly. "Whatever just happened, do not react visibly. You are being watched right now from the East Corridor camera. It came back online this morning." She kept her face completely still. "Carmen and Dolores are already protected. Both of them have signed affidavits that are outside hospital jurisdiction as of 40 minutes ago. Cross just made a move on people who are already safe." She exhaled slowly through her nose. "But he did it because someone told him about the list," June continued. "Someone you trusted enough to have that conversation near." The line went quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "Who did you tell about the list, Talia?" Her stomach dropped. There was only one person. Someone she trusted went straight to Dr. Cross.
There is a traitor inside her circle, and she already knows who it is. But so does Han Sung-jun, and he knew before she did.
Raymond Holt had told his assistant. That was it. That was the breach. His assistant, a 26-year-old named Scott Reimer who had worked at the firm for 8 months, had overheard the conversation about the list and made a phone call within the hour. Talia found out at 11 a.m. Holt called her himself. His voice was stripped of everything except the facts. Scott had been placed on immediate leave. The firm was filing an internal breach report. He was sorry. She sat in the triage bay with the phone against her ear and listened to a lawyer apologize and felt absolutely nothing. Not anger, not shock, just a cold, clear understanding that this was how it worked. Cross didn't need to be everywhere. He just needed one person in the right place at the right time. She hung up, looked at the ceiling for 3 seconds, then she picked up her clipboard and kept working. By 2 p.m., something unexpected happened. A doctor named Patricia Osai knocked on the triage door and stepped inside without waiting for an answer. She was 51 years old, head of internal medicine, and had a reputation for being the most politically careful person in the building. She never picked sides, never made waves, never stayed in a room where trouble was brewing. She closed the door behind her. "I heard about Carmen and Dolores," she said. Talia looked up. Everyone heard. "I've been here 22 years, Patricia said. She didn't sit down. She stood near the door like she might still change her mind and leave. The room was very quiet. "I have a patient file," Patricia said, "from 4 years ago, a case where Cross made a questionable call that I documented at the time as questionable. I flagged it internally. It was buried within a week." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope, set it on the desk between them. "I kept my copy." Talia looked at the envelope, didn't touch it yet. "Why now?" she asked. Patricia's jaw tightened. "Because Carmen Reyes has 3 children and she did nothing wrong." She pushed the envelope 1 inch closer. "And because I am tired of telling myself it isn't my place." Talia picked up the envelope. Inside was a patient report, 4 years old, meticulously documented. At the bottom was a flagged notation in red ink and Patricia's signature. She read the patient's name once, then she read it again. Her hands went completely still. The patient Cross made that questionable call 4 years ago, the one that got buried, hadn't died. They had survived, but only because a nurse on duty that night had caught the error in time and intervened without reporting it formally. The nurse's name was listed at the bottom of the report. Talia Moreno. She saved a patient 4 years ago without even knowing what she had saved them from. The patient's name on that 4-year report was Park Jun-so. Talia stared at it. The name meant nothing to her at first. 4 years ago, she had worked 3 different hospitals in 18 months. Hundreds of patients, thousands of small decisions made in the middle of the night with no sleep and too much coffee. But the details came back slowly. A man, mid-40s, brought in unresponsive. Cross had ordered a treatment that didn't match the presentation. Something felt wrong to her that night. She couldn't explain it technically, she just felt it in her gut the way experienced nurses do. She had quietly flagged it to the attending on duty and requested a second review. The attending had agreed. The treatment was changed. The man had walked out of that hospital 8 days later. She had never thought about it again. She looked up at Patricia. "Park Jun-so, do you know who he is?" Patricia sat down for the first time since she entered the room. "I didn't, not then. I found out 6 months after the incident when a board representative came to the hospital asking questions about that specific case." She paused. "The representative said the patient had a family member who wanted to understand exactly what happened that night." Talia's chest tightened. What was the representative's name? Patricia looked at her steadily. "He showed credentials from a private oversight firm. I only saw the name for a second." She folded her hands on the table. "I wrote it down because something about him made me feel like I should." She reached into her coat pocket again, pulled out a business card. Old, the edges soft from years in a pocket. Talia took it. One name, one title. No firm address, no phone number. Han Sung-Jun, Independent Compliance Observer. The room tilted slightly. Park Jun-so. She said the name slowly inside her head. Jun-so. June. She looked at the card again. Patricia, she said carefully. The patient who survived that night. Park Jun-so. She set the card flat on the desk. Was he ever identified beyond the name in the file? Patricia was quiet for a moment. The representative, Han Sung-Jun, he got emotional. Just once, just for a second, when I told him a nurse had caught the error. She looked at Talia directly. He asked me her name. I didn't have it on record. Talia couldn't speak. But he already knew it, Patricia said quietly. I could tell the way his face changed when I said a nurse had intervened. He already knew who it was. Park Jun-so. June. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and typed the name into a basic public record search. The results loaded slowly. The first result was a memorial page. Park Jun-so had died 14 months after leaving Cedarbrook General. Complications from a separate illness. He was listed as survived by one family member, a younger brother. The name underneath stopped her breathing entirely. Park Jun-so was his brother. Han Sung-Jun has known who Talia was for 4 years, since the night she unknowingly saved his brother's life. Everything he has done since that moment has been because of her, and he never once told her.
The board meeting started at 9 a.m. sharp. Talia walked in 30 seconds before the doors closed. Every seat at the long conference table was taken. Board members, senior physicians, legal representatives, HR, and at the far end, perfectly composed, was Dr. Fabian Cross with his hands folded and his face arranged into something that looked almost like concern. He had brought his own attorney. Talia sat down across from him and placed a single folder on the table in front of her. One folder, while his attorney had a briefcase, 3 folders, and a laptop. The board chairman, a heavy-set man named Gerald Price, opened the meeting with language so careful it barely meant anything. Independent review, due process, all parties afforded equal consideration. The words moved through the room like smoke. Then he nodded at Cross's attorney to begin. The attorney was good, I gave him that. He reframed everything with precision. The hair-pulling became a miscommunication during a high-stress shift. The buried complaints became resolved matters handled through proper internal channels. Carmen and Dolores became employees with pre-existing performance concerns. Every fact she had spent days uncovering was picked up, turned over, and set back down looking like something entirely different. Cross sat still the whole time, watching her face. She kept it empty. When the attorney finished, Gerald Price looked at Talia. "Miss Moreno, you may respond." She opened her folder. 1 page. She slid it to the board member on her left and watched it pass around the table. That is a timeline. It starts 3 days before the incident in the ER. It shows a private meeting between Dr. Cross and an unidentified individual in the East Conference Room. It shows his visit to HR before he ever stepped onto the floor. It shows the sequence of events that were already in place before he touched me. She paused. This was not a miscommunication. It was a plan. The room shifted. She slid a 2nd page. Signed affidavit from a retired judge who was a patient in Bay 2 that evening. Another page. 11 years of nursing staff accounts documenting a pattern of behavior. Another. A patient file from 4 years ago showing a treatment decision that was quietly buried after a nurse caught it and intervened. Cross's attorney leaned toward his client and whispered something.
Cross didn't move. "And this," she said. She slid the last page. An email chain spanning 9 years, showing deliberate suppression of formal complaints by Dr. Cross with the assistance of at least one board-affiliated individual. Gerald Price picked up that page. His face didn't change, but his hand tightened slightly on the paper, because his name was in that email chain. 3 board members saw his hand tighten. Talia saw it too. Cross saw it. For the first time since she had known him, Dr. Fabian Cross looked at something other than her. He looked at Gerald Price, and whatever passed between them in that half-second looked nothing like alliance. It looked like 2 men calculating how fast they could move away from each other. Then the door opened. Han Sung-Jun walked in. He just walked into that board meeting uninvited, and every single person in that room went still. Gerald Price's face changed completely the moment he saw him. These 2 men have history, and it is about to come out in front of everyone.
Every eye in the room followed Han Sung-Yoon to his seat. He didn't apologize for being late, didn't acknowledge the stares. He pulled out the chair directly beside Talia, sat down, and placed a single flash drive flat on the table in front of Gerald Price without saying one word. Price looked at the drive, then at Yoon, then back at the drive. "This meeting is a closed play it," Yoon said. His voice was quiet, the way a closed door is quiet right before someone kicks it open. Price didn't move. One of the other board members, a woman named Sandra Cho, who had been silent the entire meeting, reached across and picked up the drive. She plugged it into the laptop already open in front of her before Price could object. The room filled with audio. A conversation, recorded clearly. 2 voices. One was Price, the other was Dr. Cross. The date stamp on the recording was 11 days ago. The room listened for 90 seconds. In those 90 seconds, Price's voice said 3 things that could not be explained away by any attorney in any room, anywhere. He knew about the complaint suppression, he had directed it, and he had specifically discussed what to do about Talia Moreno by name before the incident ever happened. Cross's attorney closed his laptop. Cross himself had gone completely still. The careful composure he had maintained for the entire meeting had not broken, but it had emptied, like a house where all the furniture has been removed overnight. The walls were still standing, but there was nothing left inside. Gerald Price stood up. "This recording was obtained illegally and it was obtained by an independent compliance observer operating under federal oversight authorization," Yoon said. He slid a document across the table. "My credentials and the legal basis for the recording are on page 2. Sandra Cho was already reading it. Talia sat completely still through all of it. She had not known about the recording. Yoon had not told her. And as she sat there watching Gerald Price's carefully constructed world come apart at the seams, she felt something complicated move through her chest. Relief, anger, and something else she couldn't name yet. Because he had protected her completely, thoroughly, in ways she hadn't even known to ask for, but he had also made decisions about her fight without her telling her, used her story as the final piece of something he had been building for months. She turned and looked at him directly for the first time. He was already looking at her. Not with satisfaction, not with victory, with something quieter than both of those things. Something that looked almost like an apology waiting to exist. The board member Sandra Cho set down the credentials document and looked at Price. "Gerald," she said simply, "sit down." Price sat down. Cross hadn't moved in 4 minutes. The room was silent except for the hum of the laptop fan. Talia looked down at her single folder. 1 folder against a briefcase and 3 binders. She almost smiled. Then she felt Yoon slide something across the table toward her, small, folded. She opened it under the table with 1 hand. 4 words, "I'm sorry for everything." She folded it back up. She had about 100 things to say to him. None of them were ready yet. He protected her completely, but he also ran her entire fight from the shadows without her full knowledge. Does his reason make it okay, or does it matter that she never fully had control of her own story?
She didn't speak to him for 4 days. Not in the boardroom when the meeting ended. Not in the hallway when Sandra Cho pulled her aside to tell her the independent review board was taking full control of the investigation. Not when Raymond Holt called to say that Cross had been placed on immediate indefinite suspension, and Price had quietly tendered his resignation by end of business that same day. 4 days of complete silence. On the 5th day, Han Sung-jun was standing outside the hospital at 6:47 a.m. when she arrived for her shift. Not blocking her path, not demanding anything, just standing near the entrance with 2 cups of coffee and the specific look of a man who had rehearsed this moment and already decided he had no right to ask for it. She walked past him. Then she stopped, turned around, took one of the coffees. They sat on a bench outside the east entrance in 40-degree weather and didn't speak for 3 full minutes. Just 2 people sitting with coffee while the city moved around them like it had no idea what had happened inside that building over the past 2 weeks. Talia spoke first. "You knew who I was before I ever started here," she said, not a question. "Yes." "You arranged my transfer to this hospital." A pause. "I made sure your application was seen by the right people. You earned the position." "That's not a no." "No," he said, "it's not." She wrapped both hands around the cup. "Your brother's name was Park Jun-so." He didn't answer right away. She watched his jaw tighten once. Just once. "He talked about you," June said quietly. "He didn't know your name, but he described you. He said a nurse caught something his doctor missed and he believed she saved his life." He stared straight ahead. He said he wished he could find her and tell her that the 18 months he had after that night were the best of his life. He got to see my niece born. He got to be there for that. His voice stayed even, but only just. "He died knowing he had that time, because of what you did." Talia felt the back of her throat tighten. "You should have told me," she said. "I know. From the beginning, you should have told me all of it." "I know," he said again. "I told myself I was protecting you, that you needed to build this yourself to make it stick, that if you knew about me, it would compromise the case." He stopped. "But the truth is, I didn't know how to walk up to someone and say, 'You saved my brother's life, and I have spent 4 years trying to figure out how to matter to the world the way you did to him in one night.'" The bench was very quiet. Talia looked down at her coffee. "That's the most honest thing you've said to me," she said. "I have a lot of catching up to do," he said. She almost smiled. Almost. Her phone buzzed. She looked down. A message from Sandra Cho. "Cross is contesting the suspension. Emergency hearing tomorrow morning. He's bringing something new. We don't know what it is yet." Cross has been suspended. Price has resigned, and she is finally getting the truth from June. And now Cross is coming back with something nobody has seen yet. What could he possibly have left? Cross walked into the emergency hearing with a manila envelope and no attorney. That was the first thing that threw everyone off. He had dismissed his legal representation overnight.
He sat down alone at the far end of the table and placed the envelope in front of him without opening it, like he didn't need it yet, like it was enough just to know it was there. Sandra Cho opened the hearing. Her voice was measured, but her eyes moved to that envelope twice in the first 30 seconds. Talia saw it. Jun saw it too. Cross let the formalities run their course. Suspension terms read aloud. Grounds for contest acknowledged. Then Cho gave him the floor. He didn't stand up. 8 months ago, he said, Han Sung-jun approached me privately. He told me he represented an independent compliance body and that he had been assigned to evaluate hospital operations at Cedarbrook General. He paused. I have that conversation recorded, Cross said. He opened the envelope, slid a single page across to Cho, a transcript, time-stamped, 8 months ago, 3 days after Talia had transferred to Cedarbrook. Talia looked at Jun. His face had not changed, but she could see something moving behind his eyes, fast, calculating. He told me to keep operating as normal, so I did. Everything I did over these past 8 months, I did with the knowledge that a compliance observer had cleared me to continue. He folded his hands. If my behavior was problematic, the observer had both the authority and the obligation to intervene at any point. He chose not to, which means either my behavior was within acceptable parameters or the observer had a different agenda entirely. He looked directly at Jun for the first time, one that had nothing to do with hospital compliance. The room erupted quietly. Board members leaning to each other, legal representatives typing fast, Sandra Cho holding up one hand for order. Talia leaned close to Jun. Is that recording real? She asked under her breath. The conversation happened, Jun said quietly. The context did not. That's not the same as a no. No, he said, it's not. She sat back. Her mind was moving fast. Cross had built his entire defense around a recording he edited, and Jun has been carrying the full version this whole time. He was ready for this. How far ahead has this man been thinking from the very beginning?
Nobody moved. Not the board members, not the legal representatives, not Sandra Cho, not Cross. Nobody reached for water or checked their phone or shifted in their seat. They sat in complete silence and listened to every single word. The first 90 seconds were exactly what Cross had played, Jun asking him to continue operating as normal, clear, simple. Taken alone, it sounded exactly like authorization, but at the 2-minute mark, the recording changed everything. Jun's voice again, calm, precise. I need you to keep operating as normal because I need documented evidence of behavior that has been buried for 9 years. Every complaint that was suppressed, every staff member pushed out, every patient file altered. I need it to happen in real time with a compliance observer present so that it is legally unimpeachable. Which means I need you to keep doing exactly what you have always done, because this time someone is watching who has the authority to make it permanent. A pause on the recording. Cross's voice then, careful. And if I don't agree? Jun's voice. Then I submit the 9 years of prior documentation I already have, and you lose everything without the chance to contest a single piece of it. This way, you get due process. That is more than you gave any of the 11 people you pushed out of this hospital. The recording clicked off. The room stayed silent for 4 full seconds. Cross was looking at the table. His hands were still folded in front of him, but the knuckles had gone white. The careful emptiness that had carried him through 2 hearings was completely gone. What was underneath it was something Talia had never seen on his face before. He looked tired. Not angry, not calculating, just tired in the way that people get when they have been holding something up for a very long time and the thing finally falls anyway.
Sandra Cho looked at Cross's face and then looked away. She had seen enough. Talia sat very still. She understood everything now. The 8 months of documented misconduct, the way John had guided her without overstepping, the anonymous tips, the perfectly timed evidence, the contractor code in that East conference room 2 nights before the incident. John hadn't just been building a case against Cross. He had engineered the conditions under which Cross would expose himself completely and irrevocably. Every move Cross made in those 8 months had been made inside a frame that John had already built around him. The hair-pulling, the HR visit, the list, the leaked information, the edited recording, all of it had happened exactly the way John knew it would, because he knew how Cross thought. Because for 2 years he had thought the same way himself. She turned and looked at him. He was already looking at her, and for the first time since she had known him, there was nothing calculated in his face, nothing measured, nothing strategic. Just a man waiting to find out if what he had done was something she could forgive. Cross's attorney walked back into the room at that exact moment, sat down beside his client, leaned close. Cross shook his head once. The attorney closed his briefcase. He engineered the whole thing from the inside, including letting Cross grab her hair that night, knowing she was strong enough to survive it. She knows that now. Does knowing his reason make it okay that he made that choice for her?
She didn't say a word to him until the hearing was over. Cross surrendered his credentials at 11:14 a.m. No drama, no final statement. He signed the paperwork that Sandra Cho slid across the table, stood up, and walked out of the room without looking at anyone. His footsteps echoed down the hallway and then disappeared completely. 11 people. That was how many he had pushed out of that hospital over 9 years. 11 careers quietly dismantled. 11 people who had gone home and wondered what they had done wrong. They would all receive letters by end of week. Sandra Cho said it herself before she closed the hearing. Full review of each case, reinstatement offers where applicable, formal apology from the board on record. Carmen Reyes would get her job back, Dolores Webb too. Talia heard all of it and felt something loosen in her chest that had been pulled tight for 2 weeks straight. Then everyone filed out, and it was just her and June in the conference room. He didn't speak first. He had used up whatever right he had to control the timing of things. He sat with his hands flat on the table and waited. She stood at the window with her back to him for a long moment. Outside, the city moved the way it always did, indifferent, continuous, unbothered by what happened inside this building. "You knew he was going to grab my hair," she said. "I knew he would do something," June said. "I didn't know exactly what. I knew his pattern. Public, humiliating, something designed to make the target look unstable if they reacted." He paused. "I knew you wouldn't react." "How?" "Because of what you did 4 years ago. You caught something every trained physician in that room missed. You didn't report it loudly, you didn't make it about yourself, you just quietly fixed it and kept moving." His voice was steady but low. A person who does that under pressure doesn't break in a hallway. She turned around. "You gambled with my dignity, based on a night you weren't even there for." "Yes," he said. No qualifications, no explanations wrapped around it, just yes. The room was very quiet. Carmen cried in that break room. Dolores lost 3 weeks of income. David Pratt carried that USB drive around for 3 years, waiting for someone to ask. She took a breath. Real people paid real costs for your timeline. "I know," he said. "There is no version of what I did that doesn't have that in it." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the frame. "Carmen's reinstatement letter needs to mention full back pay, all 3 weeks. Make sure Sandra Cho knows." A pause. "I'll call her in the next 10 minutes," he said.
Talia nodded once. She walked out. In the elevator going down, she reached up and pulled her hair loose from its ponytail, let it fall, smoothed it back with both hands the way she wanted to, slowly, on her own terms. Her phone buzzed. June's number, for the first time not unknown. One message. "There's something I never told you about the night your transfer application came through. It matters, and I should have said it a long time ago." He has one more thing to tell her. After everything, the recordings, the hearings, the truth about his brother, there is still something he has been holding back. What could possibly be left?
She stopped walking before she even reached the lobby. She read the message twice. Then she turned around and took the elevator back up. He was still in the conference room, standing at the window now, the same window she had stood at 10 minutes ago. The city moving below him the same way it always did. She closed the door. "Say it," she said. He turned around. For the first time since she had known him, he looked uncertain. Not calculated uncertainty, not strategic hesitation, the real kind. The kind that lives in the chest and makes it hard to find the first word. "Your transfer application," he said. "It came through the standard process. I didn't manufacture it, I didn't pull strings to create the position." He paused. "But I did make one call, to the hiring committee, the night before they made their decision." She waited. "I told them I had reviewed your record independently, your patient outcomes, your documentation, your incident responses over 6 years at 3 different hospitals." He looked at her directly. "I told them that whoever hired you would be getting someone who operated with more quiet integrity than anyone I had seen in 20 years of compliance work." The room was still. "That's it?" she said. "That's it?" She looked at him for a long moment. "You could have told me that at any point." "I know. That's not damaging. That's not compromising. You called a hiring committee and told them the truth about my record." "I know. But it meant I had been watching you for longer than I admitted, before the transfer, before Cedarbrook. I had been following your career since the month after my brother died." He stopped. "I needed you to know the full timeline, all of it, even the parts that make me look like something other than a protector." The word landed between them. Talia walked to the table, pulled out a chair, sat down. "Sit down," she said. He sat. "Your brother talked about a nurse who saved his life, and you spent 4 years making sure that nurse was somewhere you could protect her." "Yes. And somewhere along the way, it stopped being about your brother." He didn't answer right away. The silence was its own answer. "When?" she asked. He looked at the table, then at her. "The first morning I watched you walk onto that floor. You stopped at every single bed before you looked at a single chart. You looked at the person first." He paused. "Nobody does that." Talia looked down at her hands flat on the table. "Thought about Marcus, the 7-year-old with the broken arm. What's your name?" The real smile, the one that cost her nothing and gave him everything in that moment. She thought about 11 people who had walked out of this building wondering what they did wrong. She thought about her brother-in-law, her ponytail, 4 seconds with her eyes closed in Bay 4. She thought about a man who had carried a USB drive for 3 years waiting for someone to ask. She stood up, walked to the door, stopped. "There's a diner on Mercer Street. David Pratt introduced me to it. The coffee is bad, but the booths are good." She kept her hand on the frame. 6 o'clock. She didn't wait for an answer. In the lobby, she pushed through the front doors into the cold air, stopped on the steps, looked up at the sky for 3 full seconds. Then she smoothed her hair back, slowly, both hands, on her own terms, and walked into the rest of her life. From a single act of humiliation in an emergency room to 11 people restored, 1 corrupt system dismantled, and 2 people finding each other on the other side of it all. If this story moved you, if you have ever been the person in that hallway who kept walking when they wanted to fall apart, share this with someone who needs to hear it today.
Also, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.